Hello, everybody. Hello. There we go. That's better. Now you can probably hear me. Yeah, there we go. You know, many scientists have done all kinds of studies and found that if you want to be heard on a live stream, it helps if you have a microphone. And I'm here to tell you today that we've proven that. So welcome to, this is Leadership and Strategic Management. This is the live stream that I do about once a week where we talk about higher level business stuff. And the title of this episode is called Your Company is Not Your Family. Here's why. This is Leadership Skills episode number 26. So welcome to all. If you are seeing my beautiful cherub-like face in this flattering light, you should see a chat box somewhere in the vicinity near my face, depending on what device you're watching this on. And if you have been a subscriber to my channel for any amount of time, you should be able to get in there and participate. That's the point. So this is an interactive live stream. You can ask me questions and comment on what we're doing here. Almost had a coughing fit before I went live. So I apologize if that should occur, because there's a bug going around and I think I've got it. So that's always good. TGIF otherwise. Obligatory shout out goes out to my YouTube channel members and Patreons. You guys are awesome. Also my super thanks donors. Those are really nice to get. And special thanks to my viewers and participants. That means you. And yes, I mean you. Sit up straight. Thank you for being here. Okay, let's get into it. Today, we're talking about another sort of higher level business function here. If I can just pull up here we go. I'm just pulling up some notes I made for myself a couple of days ago when I dreamed this up. We're talking about something that you don't usually learn in school, which is strange because it's pretty damn important if you ever are an executive or anyone that has any control over an organization or any piece of an organization. And that is fiduciary duty. This is something that if you take an MBA, you might technically learn in theory, like they kind of walk you through it at a very high level in a very theoretical way. But the reality is that it forms basically the entire incentive structure of your job, and you're never formalized, you're never walked through it when you are moved into an executive role or anything like that, where you have to be making big decisions about things. They don't stop you and say, do you understand the concept of fiduciary duty? Has someone walked you through that? No, they never do that. Nor is it really explicitly spelled out in employment contracts or anything like that. So usually when people hear about this, it's because there's been a crisis and, you found that you're personally liable for something you did, or you talk to business lawyers and, or a lawyer is in the room and they raise a concern and say, how do we explain our fiduciary duty if this were to go wrong and things like this? And usually they're met with a blank stare and people go, what? So that's why I wanted to talk about this. It also ties in with some very basic stuff. And let's start off with a story that I'd like to tell. So back about 10 million years ago when I was in my 20s, I was working at a place and I was working with a bunch of other 20-year-olds. And somebody made the comment saying that, surely they're going to hire people because that's the whole point of this. If the company makes money, then the whole purpose of the company is to give people a job, and that's what they do. That's what they do with the money. The money goes into the company, it gets logged as a profit, and then they use that profit to hire more employees. And at the time, I remember I didn't have a strong objection to that. That kind of sort of made sense on some level, I guess. Unfortunately, it's completely diluted. It's actually ass backwards. And unfortunately, a lot of people, through no fault of their own, they kind of believe that. And then that sets them up for a huge check, a huge reality shock when they observe what's happening to them and all around them. Reality does not bear out that theory. Okay, so that's kind of what's setting the stage for this. Now, let's do this with my good, close, personal friend, ChatGPT, because I'm trying to encourage people to use these tools. And also, just so you guys know that when I say a lot of things, it's not like something I've just made up. You know what I mean? That's one of the reasons I like to use ChatGPT in these sessions or other AI bots, because, you know, a reaction I've gotten a lot of times is, you know, I say something and the reaction I get in the comments is like, oh, BS. It's like, you're just making that up. It's like, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. Like, go do your own research. You know, you know, don't take my word for it. Go and corroborate what I'm saying through independent sources, and you'll see that this is in fact true. So hopefully that's where the learning is. You see that, oh, okay, this is a thing. It's not just Bill, the company's expert, telling me because he's making it up, right? So let's do this. Okay. So just a couple of things to set this up. Okay, so fiduciary duty. Can you give me a definition of fiduciary duty? I've noticed it's something that people in you know, management positions or executive management positions in organizations don't often really understand when they kind of should. So let's start with the definition, and then can we talk about why people don't understand it as well as they should? And I would encourage everybody to use some of these AI tools to learn, or at least, you know, do a sort of very superficial validation of things. Okay, so what is fiduciary duty? Fiduciary duty is a legal obligation to act in the best interests of someone else, ahead of your own interests, right? So the idea is that a business is owned by shareholders. Hopefully everybody here has heard of this, right? It's owned by shareholders, and the obligation of all the people that make decisions, that run that business or that organization, they need to act in the interest of the shareholders, right? Now, I mean, I'm sure we've all heard this. It all seems self-evident. Yeah. You would be amazed how many people don't actually realize this and what it means. Okay, so when you've been entrusted with power, authority, or control over their assets, decisions, and outcomes. So in the case of an organization, like a privately held company, like a corporation, you have the shareholders who own the business. And as a manager, you are required to put their interests ahead of your own, right? That's the idea. Think of a bank, right? That's been the classic example where somebody puts their money in the bank, right? And then you have the bankers, the officers that are in managing the bank. They decide what's to be done with the money that their creditors deposited in the bank, right? And the idea is that they're going to be faced with all kinds of ethical dilemmas, right? They're going to be faced with this idea that, okay, I could do option A, and that would be in the interest of the depositors, the people that have put their money in my charge, right? Or I could do option B, and that might not be the best for the people that are trusting me with their money, but it would be the best for me personally, because then I can really clean up, right? So you have decisions like this all the time, right? When you're in charge of an organization. And the idea is you have this, in theory, you have this thing called fiduciary duty that makes it plain that you have to act in the interest, not of yourself, but of the people you have obligations to. In this case, in our bank example, it would be the people that put their money in the bank, right? And are trusting you with it. In a management type role, that would be the shareholders of your organization, right? It's not your business, it's their business. They've hired you to run it for them because they are doing more important things like lying on a beach somewhere, right? So that's the idea. Or they're just hanging out in Monaco. So the thing that governs your entire job is this idea of fiduciary duty. You're not there to do things that make it easier for you or to make it more profitable for you or advantageous for you. You're there to serve them, basically. That's the idea, right? Now, the problem, of course, is that in reality, in the day-to-day nitty-gritty of things, This is usually obfuscated. This is usually lost. Okay. And you do things that serve you a lot of times, right? At least in small ways that can grow into big ways, especially when you haven't been taught this stuff or, been taken through it by, company lawyers and things. It sits right on the border between the world of corporate law and business, right? It's technically a little more in the world of business, but in reality, in practice, it's usually lawyers that deal with this stuff more, right? So that's why it's kind of right on the border. And so therefore, it's not really anybody's responsibility to walk you through it, because each world thinks the other one is dealing with it, at least in my experience. So that's the deal. We got some people in the chat. That's great. We got America First 21 says, yes, the last place I worked stressed. We were a family. Most hostile workplace I ever worked. Yeah, I don't doubt it. Usually they use that stuff as a propaganda tool to get you to drink the Kool-Aid, and then you're easier to influence, basically. They can get you to do what they want. And unfortunately, that's the reality in most situations. America First says, no offense about my handle name. We have major problems on America. Yeah, well, yeah. I don't want to disagree with you, but I don't want to get political. I'm not here to talk politics, but message received. And thank you for saying that. You're just responding to something I said to you the other day. So no offense taken, my friend. You're doing fine. Thank you for being here. If you have any questions as we go, feel free to speak up. Samarth says hi, and McKinley says hello. So hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. You guys are awesome. Okay, I need to move this along. I apologize for the totally unstructured stream of consciousness thing I'm doing. If you guys want to ask questions and kind of get me to focus, feel free. Okay, so we've talked about fiduciary duty and what it is as a legal obligation to act in the best interest of someone else. In this case, it'll be the shareholders of the organization, right? Now, what does this mean to us? If you're an employee or you're a manager, what the hell does this mean? Who cares, right? Here's the deal. I just want to see what this thing is saying here. Yeah, so just walking you through it. Okay, duty of loyalty, duty of care, duty of good faith, things like this, right? The problem is, if they don't walk executives through this, you can bet your sweet biffy they don't walk employees through this. And so employees, never having been taught any of this stuff, are under the impression that the organization they work for, the employer, which is usually a corporation, usually in the private sector, they care about them. They don't, right? That's the thing. They have absolutely no obligation to their employees, technically, right? This kind of surprises people. The problem is that you've got human beings involved, right? Now, if you're working for a boss and you see your boss every day, you interact with them face to face, you have a normal human interaction with them. You're friendly towards them, they're friendly towards you, things like this, right? It feels like they are loyal to you in the way that, two friends would be loyal to each other, right? And this is a real thing. It really feels that way. Unfortunately, depending on the situation, generally speaking, they're really, really not, If they if the boss is faced with a decision, they're a decision maker, and they can do option A and make a certain amount of money, okay, and keep all the employees, right? Or they can do option B and make more money and unfortunately lay off a few employees. Guess which one they're required to do, right? If it's a privately held company, if you're in the private sector, they're obligated to do option B. Now, they may not want to do option B. They're human beings. Now, there's human beings and there's human beings. Some people are really friendly and they're moral and blah, blah, blah. And then there's other people that really, really aren't, right? But generally speaking, they're human beings. They might find option B abhorrent, right? But guess which one they're required to do for their job? Now, if they don't do option B, okay, they're technically not doing their job. And depending on how closely they're policed, they can lose their job because of it, right? That's the implications of this. Now, the problem is that in the real world, this isn't always enforced to a T. A lot of people in their day-to-day operations, they're reasonable, you know. The other thing is that higher ups, whether that's a board or a more senior manager, they will usually side with the manager in question. They'll say, like, look, I trust that you know what you're doing and that you will make the right decision. And, so I'm not going to second guess you. I know the decision between option A and option B, it's complex. There's a lot of factors involved. What if option B is the right thing to do now, but in 6 months' time, we wish we still had all those employees, right? So I understand that it's nuanced, it's complex, and I trust that you will handle it appropriately, keeping in mind where your loyalties are, right? Okay? That's usually what happens in the real world. That happens at every level, okay? Unfortunately, though, at the end of the day, this stuff unfortunately wins out, and that's led to tons and tons of issues, especially with employees who don't understand that managers have to operate this way. Especially when, in addition to that, the organization and the manager, like America First 21 pointed out, are doing things to propagate this illusion that the company is loyal to the employees and has the best interests of the employees in mind, which it doesn't. Okay, it cares about employees to the point where it serves them, but no more. Marcel says, haha, for real, it is tricky to the brain to disassociate these two ideas. Some employers know this, and some will even rely on it to get the most out of an employee. Marcel says, hello there, I'm back for today's live. Yeah, welcome back, Marcel. It's good to have you here. Yes, so this is a very real thing. Now, the problem is, and this brings me to my second point. The first point was, after we talked about what fiduciary duty is, the first point was that this is not taught at any level the way it should be, considering it governs the entire job of managers at every level, right? The second point is that what muddies the waters, like I just was talking about, is that separately, organizations have an incentive to manage employees' expectations, shall we say, to massage the truth, shall we say, and convince employees that the decision makers at the company are actually loyal to them, which they're not. The reality is that employees tend to work better. They're more productive for the organization when they believe that the organization is loyal to them, right? Unfortunately, the organization is not loyal to them. That's not what they're there for. In fact, a lot of organizations regard employees as a necessary evil, in the same way that they regard inventory as a necessary evil, or infrastructure, like property, plant, and equipment, buildings and such, as a necessary evil. If they could reduce that stuff and still do business well, they would, right? They don't like the fact that they have employees. They would like to minimize the amount of employees that they have, but get the same amount of work done, right? So in a sense, they have the incentives that you could almost say they're hostile to having employees, right? So this is how the incentives are all lined up in an organization. But there's conflicting incentives that they want employees to believe that the organization cares for them and is looking out for them and that kind of stuff. So this creates a total contradiction. And if you are an employee, I'm sure you might have had experiences or observations where you've seen this, right? They're saying one thing, but then they're signaling another through their actions, right? This is very common. America First says, I've had multiple management jobs. It is walking on a tightrope to maintain respect with staff and follow directives from upper management. Yes, you're absolutely right. It's you've got your real job, right, that you have to do, but yet you have to maintain an image. You have to put on a mask and make it seem like you have a completely different set of incentives, right? Now, I'm making it out to be very, very dramatic. Most of the time, it isn't quite this dramatic. The two don't completely contradict in major ways all the time, but there's that tension that's there. And this can lead to some real friction, right? Humblebee for him says, I believe the Amazon layoffs were unethical. Okay, I don't know the details of that, so I can't comment. But what I'm saying is that, I mean, look, disclaimer, I don't know about the Amazon layoffs. I don't know what that's referring to. If it's probably a current event of which I'm ignorant, but you know what I'm saying? It's like, you could almost make the assumption, if you're an employee, that the organization is going to look for a chance to get rid of you, right? They employ you because it's necessary for them right now. But if something changed in the future and they could get rid of you, but still get the same amount of work done, they would. That's the point, right? They have that incentive. Okay. And good morning to McLevin, right? Thank you for being here. So that's to see, this is the misalignment of incentives that's there. And the problem is a lot of employees, they believe the management of organizations when the management is trying to convince them that, oh yeah, we're here for you and we care about you and you're our number one priority and all this kind of stuff, right? So that's the problem. Now, I'd like to cover another thing with everybody here. If you have heard of this or you haven't heard of this, this is a thing very important. Okay, can you define what a psychological contract is? Because this is another very important concept that if you haven't heard of this, you want to see this because you will recognize this everywhere once you know what it is. Okay, so a psychological contract is a set of unwritten, informal, and perceived expectations between an employee and an employer about what each owes the other. It doesn't necessarily have to be an employee and an employer, but two parties, right? Okay, so let me paint you an example here for people that have never heard of this, okay? Let's pretend that I'm a boss, okay? And you're my employee. And congratulations, you have the best boss in the world. Aren't you lucky? Now, what I do is I have you as my employee, and I also have another person as a direct employee. Let's call them Jane, okay? So you work with Jane. You guys are coworkers, right? And what I do is one day I give Jane extra work. I say, I'm sorry, Jane, I need you to do this. Unfortunately, I need it done by the end of the day. It has to be done before tomorrow. So if you have to stay late to complete this, please stay late, get the work done. I would consider it a favor if you could do that for me. And Jane says, sure, no problem. So the next day, I come in, I see that Jane has finished the work. Excellent. I say to Jane, okay, as a reward, Jane, for going above and beyond and helping me out when I was in a bind, here's a bonus, let's say here, $1,000 bonus. There you go. Wow. Okay. Excellent. Now, 2 weeks go by. Okay. And I come to you and I say, let's say your name is, what's a good name here? McLevin, right? McLevin Jones III. That's your name. So I say, McLevin, okay, listen, I'm in a bit of a bind. There's some work that needs to be done. It needs to be done before tomorrow morning. I'm going to give that to you. I need you to stay and finish it before you go home. Can you do that? And you say yes. And I say, okay, great. So You stay, you do the work. Then I come in the next day. You're there, right? And I say, thanks, McLovin. Excellent job. And then I turn around and I leave. No bonus, right? Now, you might have the reaction. You say, whoa, wait a minute. What was that? I stayed and I did all that work for you when you asked. I stayed late. I had a family thing last night, but I skipped it so I could stay and do this work because you asked me to. Where's my bonus? And I would say, and I do say to you, I say, I'm sorry. I don't recall promising you to give you a bonus. I'm really appreciative that you did the work. I have no more money that I can just give out to employees, for doing that. So thanks very much. Maybe please accept this coupon for you can get like free shoe polish or 35 cents off if you buy 10 or something. You know what I mean? Now, how would you feel? You'd probably feel pissed off and used, right? Because in your mind, you had this idea that, okay, Jane got a $1,000 bonus for staying and doing some extra work. So McLovin, was asked to stay and do some extra work, so I should get that bonus too, right? That's a psychological contract, right? There was no actual promise, there was no actual agreement, implied or otherwise, that I was going to give you a bonus, but you assumed there was. It felt to you like there was one, right? So who's in the right in that situation? Who has a case, who doesn't? Well, technically, as the manager, I'm in the right. I didn't promise you anything, so the fact that I didn't give you anything means I've done nothing wrong, right? I asked you to do something, you did it, I said thank you, right? Why am I now obligated to pay you money for that? You know what I mean? But on the other hand, from another perspective, it's like, this is kind of unfair. The other person got a bonus, so all things being equal, we're all supposed to be treated the same. Why aren't I paid one, right? So that's a psychological contract. Now, the point I'm trying to make here, talking about this, is that a lot of employees believe they have a psychological contract with their employer or with their boss or with their management, that they should get certain things and that there's an arrangement that exists when in fact, technically, there is no arrangement. Like for example, you work really, really hard. You do everything the boss asks, and you're the junior employee. And then one day, the announcement comes down that they're laying people off. They're going to lay off 10% from every department, right? So you're the one that always does all this extra work that the boss asks. You think, okay, well, surely you're not going to pick me and get rid of me as the 10%. I'm useful. I do more work than anybody here, right? Well, there is no such agreement. That's a psychological contract, meaning it feels like a contract, but there isn't one. Guess who they lay off? They lay off the junior person. That means it's you, right? And it feels extremely unfair, right? So who's right, who's wrong? Now, if you brought this into a court, the management would win. They didn't promise you anything. They didn't say you're immune from layoffs. There was no promise made. It was not in writing. It was not stated. It was not implied. Like in no way, shape, or form did we promise anything. You're just assuming we promised and acting on that, right? You know what I mean? So you got to watch for psychological contracts. You've got to be able to recognize these things because they can be sources of real liability for you. That's the point I was getting at. America First sounds like gender discrimination. It might sound like it, but it isn't, right? I have two employees. One happens to be female, one happens to be male. The first one that I saw when I needed work done, that's who I asked, right? So there you go. I mean, I don't know if you realize this, but those two employees probably had different heights, right? The female employee may have been shorter than the male employee. It actually sounds a lot more like height discrimination than anything else, right? You can argue it whichever way you want. It's just that we're hypersensitive about gender a lot of times, especially now in this climate of opinion. So we just always see that because we're always looking for it. But anyway, I'm not here to talk about gender discrimination. I'm just talking about a psychological contract. So hopefully that makes sense. That's kind of the idea here. And employers and other parties will use those against you when they can, right? They would love to be able to control your behavior while simultaneously not having any obligation toward you, right? It's very masterfully done, right? This is one of the things that, is involved in power politics, right? It's just like that question, how can I influence a decision so I get the decision that I want? We do the thing that I want done, right? But yet, if it succeeds, then I'm the hero. If it fails, then I'm immune from criticism because officially I didn't make the decision. I wasn't connected to it, right? So it's things like this, right? That kind of, these games of power politics. If ever you want to learn this stuff, like, from a textbook, like here's how all these principles work, study organizational behavior in my MBA course, by the way, which covers everything in an MBA. That's one of the courses, right? One of the books you read, one of the areas you study. So it's a fascinating topic. It's great to be able to learn all the tricks, if for no other reason than to recognize it when other people try and pull them on you, right? So it's a really good thing. Okay, so I have basically finished my spiel that I wanted to discuss from the outset. Now, if you guys have questions, I see there's 20 people here. Thank you for joining me today. If you have questions about this or any other topic that are like related to higher level business stuff, fire away and let's get into it. Someone's talking about job interviews. Yeah, so we're not really talking about job interviews here, unfortunately. We're talking about sort of business stuff. But yeah, so recognizing psychological contracts is a big thing, right? And it's to your advantage because this is one of the tools that's going to be used against you out in the world, by parties that would like to influence you and control your behavior, right? And if you understand this stuff, I'm not recommending anybody, uses this as a weapon or anything like that to get at other people. I'm just talking about in the interest of recognizing it as a concept and being able to protect yourself against it. So anyway, hopefully that makes sense. Yeah, and that kind of, in a way, comes back to what America First 21 was saying at the very outset, talking about how companies will say, like, we're a family here and all this kind of stuff. And then, hopefully, the ones that say stuff like that are usually the ones you really have to watch out for, right? It's going to be the worst working conditions. They're not going to honor commitments. They're going to, say misleading things and to get you to perform, but then you're not going to give anything back. Stuff like that, right? Hopefully people that have been out in the world, I'm sure you guys know exactly what I'm talking about, right? Greg, we're not really talking about job interviews here, unfortunately. I do have a live stream in an hour and a half, or just under an hour and a half, called Honest HR Nitrous, where we do talk about that stuff. So feel free to come back then if you want to get into like job interviews and things. If absolutely nobody speaks up about this stuff, I guess I can answer your question, but then I'll have to wind down this chat. But yeah, I found that this stuff is fascinating. And back in 2008, where they had the big sort of credit crunch, or whatever you want to call it, global meltdown / Great Recession, whatever it was called, there were a lot of problems with fiduciary duty. A lot of CEOs and things acted like they had never heard of this, even though it's central to their entire job. Those are some high profile exceptions where they played dumb. And some of them came out relatively unscathed, others didn't. But it really showed this stuff. It really showed like how important this was, Yeah, thanks, Greg. Yeah, I do live streams about a couple of different topics. I mainly talk about job search and employment and all that kind of stuff. On Mondays, I do a stream about entrepreneurship, so like stuff on the real small end of business. And on Fridays, I do this one, leadership and management, where we talk about stuff at the higher end of business. So, yeah. But that's the structure of organizations. Hopefully everybody understands that. The management of a business is loyal to the shareholders, to the owners, right? Whoever owns it, it could be an individual that owns the business. Just like, some people might buy a house, other people might buy a business, so they own the business, right? And then the people that work in the business, even the person that's like the CEO or something, they're working for the owner, right? The owner puts them in charge of this little thing of theirs, almost like you would hire, I don't know, some kind of servant or something to take care of your stuff. They hire you to take care of their business, right? To make sure that it's profitable, it's not being flushed down the drain, that kind of thing, right? So that's who signs your checks, that's who you're loyal to, that's whose interest you have to look out for. That's the whole point. And if the owner picks the wrong person, usually, moral hazard. You did the wrong thing, you picked the wrong person, they did a terrible job, and they messed up your thing, right? It's like buying a house, putting somebody in charge of it, and having them be, an idiot that burns down the house accidentally. It's like, yeah, you have insurance, I suppose, in the case of a house, but you usually don't have insurance in the case of a business. Not to that extent. So, whoops, live and learn. It gets really interesting in the case of like a bank, like we were talking about, where now, it's a little bit of a different relationship. The bank has customers, but the customers are entrusting the bank with their stuff, usually their money, right? So if the bank just displays gross incompetence and then the bank goes out of business with your money inside it, there's a problem there. But if people find that the bankers intentionally weren't looking out for the interests of their customers, they were violating their fiduciary duty, then not only can they, like the organization, be dragged into court and sued and, you get damages, but the individual bankers themselves can be personally liable. And I think it was Italy that actually started throwing people into jail for doing this, right? They personally would go to prison for terms. I thought that was actually a good move because it struck fear into the non-mob business component of Italy, put it that way. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe the mob was already in prison. I'm not sure. Yeah, America First says, or if their orientation is flawless. Now, what was that in reference to? Yeah. Marcel says, basically almost all modern corporations will be structured like Ys. Okay. In the perspective of the employee, how should he, the employee, react to all these cooperative psychological contracts? Well, what's your opinion on it? Well, how should you respond to it? Well, first of all, you should understand what it is and that it's there, right? So your expectations match reality. You understand who your employer is really loyal to. So they're going to, in a lot of cases, they're going to do everything in their power to convince you that their loyalty is to you, right? And that if you go above and beyond for them, they will reciprocate and go above and beyond for you, right? That's what they want you to believe. It furthers their interests if you believe this, right? The reality, of course, is that they have no obligations to you beyond what's in the law of the land, like the labor laws, and what's in your employment contract. Those are the only two things that state any kind of obligation they have to you. Now, if you read those two things properly, you will usually notice that, they can lay you off at any moment. They don't have to give you any privileges or reciprocate favors or anything. There's no guarantees for a lot of stuff. Your entire relationship with them could end at any moment at their discretion, right? So that's the first thing. Just that alone, most people don't realize, right? Now, knowing this, okay, knowing the nature of your relationship with your employer, right? Maybe your behavior will change, right? Maybe you'll be less loyal to your employer. Maybe you will be looking for other jobs much more often. You might be doing things on the side. You might be doing side hustles or, starting up your own business on the side. Things that are genuinely in your interest, right? Instead of just doing what they would have you do and trust them and being loyal to them and not looking anywhere else or pursuing any interest that would be in your own interest to do, right? That's all I'm saying. My goal with this is to have a very small impact to raise awareness, even just having that needle move, microscopic kind of way, to raise awareness about this. It's to your own interest to know about this stuff. And I recommend also that people just, if this is interesting to you and it affects you, don't just listen to me, go out and learn it. The obvious thing to do would be to just do what I just did here, with ChatGPT, and just ask it, what are these concepts? Do they apply to me? How does this apply to me? What should I do about it? So let's do that right now. Okay, so let's say I'm an employee and I work for an employer, and I feel that I have a little bit of a psychological contract with my employer. I feel that, I go above and beyond for them, and I trust that they will not lay me off at the drop of a hat and take care of me and honor their promises to me and so on. Having recognized that I might have a bit of a psychological contract with them, what should I do about it? Is there something I can do that's in my own interest to protect myself against them abusing this relationship? That might not have been phrased the best, but I'm doing this off the top of my head. Okay, let's see here. Recognizing a psychological contract. First, mindset shift. Psychological contract is a risk exposure, not a protection. Absolutely. It feels comforting, but it is unilateral and unenforceable. What not to do: don't comfort your employer about or confront your employer about the psychological contract. Don't assume good intentions equal protection. And don't stop performing out of resentment. That only hurts you. Yeah, that'll paint a target on your back. Convert trust into tangible signals. If you're going above and beyond, ask yourself, is this visible beyond my immediate manager? Is it documented? Does it show? That's if you're going to try and enforce it. Okay, so if you're going to try and work with them and you're still going to engage in this. Reduce single point of failure risk. One of the biggest dangers of psychological contracts is over-reliance. One manager controls your fate, one team defines your value, one company defines your identity. Right? Protective moves. Build relationships outside your team. Cross-train into adjacent skills. Get exposure to revenue, customers, or critical systems. Okay? The great thing about if you're using chatbox and stuff, you can then follow up with questions about things that it's saying, right? Treat verbal assurances as non-binding until proven otherwise. That's a big one. It doesn't mean that you have to mistrust people all the time. It just means that, manage the risk. If they could lay you off at any moment, maybe you shouldn't commit unilaterally to any employer. Maybe you should always be looking elsewhere, and you should always put your own your own interests first. Don't subordinate your own interests all the time. Okay, keep outside market value. What? Keep your outside market value warm. This is the most practical self-defense. You don't need to be job hunting, you need to be job ready. That means update the resume every 6 to 12 months, light networking even when happy. Do this all the time. Any opportunity you have, especially if you're happily employed and you're gainfully employed and it's working out, do this. That will only help you. It'll open up all kinds of doors for you. Just do it. If you don't know how to do that, learn. It's surprisingly easy, even for introverts. I'm an introvert. You can do this, trust me. Knowing what roles you could get today, understanding your compensation market, or whatever that means. Don't confuse loyalty with overinvestment. Build a personal exit buffer. So there's all kinds of stuff in here. So anyway, you get the idea. I mean, you could read all this and you could look this up yourself, but hopefully that makes sense. This is what the awareness of this will hopefully do for you. America First says hiring, onboarding, introduction to a company as a family. Yes. Or if their orientation is flawless. Yeah. Yeah, and that's kind of the thing that triggers all this. That we're a family quote, right? By the way, I have never said that in my career. I make it a point to never say that because you're not a family. You're not. You're an employee. I'm an employee. Even if I'm the CEO, I'm an employee. And we're all in this together. What I can do is I can treat you with respect, and I can very clearly define my role. But the flip side of that is that people need to educate themselves about what these situations are. Just living in ignorance is not a good thing. You will not come out on top. You will be manipulated. You will be exploited. Especially when all the knowledge is at your fingertips these days. You know what I mean? Bolt Lightning Honeypot says that is true. They can terminate you at any time. Absolutely. Except that I sucked and was slow. That's true. And some places they won't terminate you if you suck and you're slow, but a lot of places will. And a lot of places will terminate you even if you're keen and competent and productive. Maybe you're just the junior employee or something. You know what I mean? So that's the thing. Just I've seen a lot of people in my career sell their souls to companies. They believe all the company promises. And this is also a bit of a throwback to before my time, like in the 70s and the 60s and earlier, where, like, especially between World War II and about 1980, where, a lot of organizations, especially around the world, they developed a more parental role towards their employees. I think Japan was leading the charge on this, where the idea was the employee is loyal to the company, goes above and beyond, right? Doesn't just quit and get another job at the drop of a hat. Instead, they're loyal to them. But in return, the organization takes care of you like a parent. That's why they were giving out benefits like pensions and stuff. Once you sign on with the company, all things being equal, you're expected to be there your whole career, right? And they will take care of you. And that's why they give you a pension and blah, blah, blah. It's because they expect you to be there, right? For the long term. So that's kind of how a lot of large, mature employers behaved in the 60s and the 70s. They had the luxury of being able to behave like that, and they did. The problem is that everybody got into that mentality. So starting in, I don't know when it started, in the 70s and the 80s, mainly in the 80s, people were expecting that kind of relationship from their employer, but now it was more short-term thinking. If the quarterly profits of the organization were down, they would make up the shortfall by laying off, 15% of their employees, there we go. Problem solved, right? That's also when HR began, this modern thinking of employees as resources, right? Like they're not living, breathing, emotional creatures. They're like resources like energy or real estate or inventory or raw materials. You know what I mean? So therefore we can just, employ them and lay them off at will, right? We don't think twice about that stuff. It's very mechanical, right? So that ended the sort of like loyal relationship between these two, between the employer and the employee. And the problem is, think of a lot of traditional, industries, a lot of employers where you had a union, you had a seniority system. So you might get hired when you're in your 20s and you're like the most junior person on a 300-person list. You're at the bottom because you're the most recent person that was hired, right? The last person to be hired. So you're at the very bottom of the totem pole. So you're going to be the first one out the door if they have layoffs, right? But you're okay with this because the belief is that they will be hiring more people and that you will gradually move up that list, right? You'll no longer be the most junior employee, but that's like a belief that will happen. It's an assumption that will happen. So when that doesn't happen and you're stuck for 20 years being the most junior employee, right? Always getting the butt of every kind of decision, always having the hard job to do, being the first to get laid off, etc. It feels unfair because there's another psychological contract. You believed there was an agreement that you would move up that seniority list. That was the assumption, but that wasn't actually an agreement. And it didn't work out like that. And technically, the organization, the company's not at fault for that not happening. They never made any promises that they would hire more people after you. That's not something they committed to. You know what I mean? So this is why we got to be good at recognizing these things and then looking out for ourselves, doing things that are in our own interest so we don't get screwed and end up on the losing end of these deals, right? Like it's not really a deal, it's a psychological deal, But I've seen many people get the short end of the stick on things like this. And it stems partly from their ignorance of like these ideas, these concepts, and their failure to recognize them. And then their failure to mitigate those risks by doing things that are in their interest, right? America first, don't outshine the master. That's kind of, we could get into that. That's kind of more of a separate thing, I think, though, isn't it? Marcel says, why is that? From where was that originated? What? Who had this idea? I'm sorry, Marcel, I'm not sure what specific things you're referring to there. I covered a lot of ground, so if you could just spell out specifically what you're wondering about. These ideas, nobody came up with them. They emerged. They're based on the patterns of human behaviors, right? Like, for example, saying, who invented the idea of double-crossing someone? Or who invented the idea of lying? It's like, well, that's just what humans have unfortunately done since antiquity, and they've just given it a name and defined it, right? All these things come back to the incentive structures. If you want to understand behavior, you have to understand the incentives, right? If you understand the incentives, then you understand the behaviors. It's very simple. So if you see things that don't add up, people say one thing and they do another, for example, and you go like, that doesn't make any sense, from the way I reason it, you're shooting yourself in the foot. Why would you do that, right? Well, the reason why it doesn't add up is usually because you don't understand what the incentives actually are for that person. That's why their behavior doesn't make any sense, right? Once you realize that, okay, they get something out of this, or they're their employment contract with the company says this. They get paid for doing this. You don't know that, so therefore their behavior doesn't make sense to you, etc. Anyway, let me know if you guys have any questions. I'm just sort of, I'm pretty much done explaining the main topic I wanted to bring up, and I feel we've done that. We've talked about fiduciary duty. We've talked about the fact that it's not really specifically taught anywhere consistently when it should be. We've talked about the psychological contract, what it is. We've talked about a couple of examples of it. And then we talked about the basic idea of what you can do once you recognize this and you identify it out in the world and in your life, what you can maybe do about it, right? Because the employer knows all this stuff, and it's very much intentional. You might not be in that situation. You might be oblivious to it, and they're manipulating you, they're influencing you. So I recommend everybody just takes 10 minutes in their lives to bone up on some of these ideas. It can really help you not get screwed over in major life-changing ways. If you recognize a situation and you proactively kind of put stuff in place that serves you, that helps you, not your employer, but you specifically, so that whichever way things go with an employer or any kind of other partner you might have, like a business partner or anything like that, you will be okay. That's the goal here. Why do I have to be a psychotherapist to succeed at work? I just need a paycheck. You don't. You don't have to be anything. But if you take a look around, you will find that people who are ignorant get screwed over. Now, there's all kinds of expressions to that fact, right? Like what is it? Sucker born every 5 minutes, or things like a fool and his money, soon parted. You know what I mean? Like hopefully that is self-evident. So I'm not saying you need to be anything, but what I am saying is that if you open your eyes and you look at what's going on, the people that you usually work for are engaged in this kind of activity. If you're not careful and you choose to bury your head in the sand, there's a chance you could be screwed over. So it's for your own interest to learn some basic aspects of human nature and, behave accordingly, just to minimize the personal risk to you. That's all I'm saying. Marcel says, I'm sorry, I got it out of context. You said that this cultured got above all popular between 1945-90. What was that? Why was that? Well, to get the real lowdown, you could ask an academic. My version of it is because things were going on in the world that fostered that. For example, Japanese culture, to my limited knowledge, has been very based in honor and loyalty and things like that. Those are values traditionally associated with Japan. Like they take it so much further than traditionally they have in the West. And so as a result, that got baked into their corporations and their companies and things when that country was rebuilt after World War II, essentially. And nobody would have cared except that Japan started really kicking ass economically. In fact, in the 80s, they were scared that Japan was going to completely put them out of business. If you've ever watched movies from the 80s, like things like Back to the Future and all those kind of movies, there's this theme of we're all kind of worried that Japan is going to put us all out of business, things like that. So anyway, it was I'm not an expert on this stuff, but it was all that kind of stuff all mixed together. So therefore, the way Japanese companies started behaving, I know they were influential in America, And America sort of was very prosperous after World War II, and so they had the luxury of being able to do this kind of thing. But it was a downward slide, in the 70s and certainly in the 80s away from that stuff. And that's what caught a lot of people by surprise. A lot of people got screwed over. They had committed to working for a company for their entire lives, and then, expecting that the company would take care of them. And then they find, nope, they've been laid off. Just they're out on their ass one day, and it's a major gear shift for people. That happened to a lot of people so much that it affected the culture a bit, right? And then in the 90s and the 2000s and beyond, employees had a little bit of a different attitude. It was more like, this is just a straight exchange. My time for cash, you give me cash, I work for you. I'm not interested in your promises of taking care of me long term. I'm not going to work and only get promises from you. I'm not going to put any faith in that. If you want me to work for you, I need cash in my hand. And that's the end of our association. I have no loyalty to you, and it's clear you have no loyalty to me. And that's how we deal with each other, right? It's been more like that. But despite that, people still get screwed over because they still don't understand basic concepts like we covered today. Hopefully that makes sense. You can look it up, just for the sheer hell of it. Let's do this very quickly. I'm sure not too many people are interested, but okay, so in the decades after World War II, the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s and beyond, I've noticed there's been a shift in the corporate culture where in certain circles in the past, just after World War II, large organizations across the board were more loyal to employees. They had more of a parental type relationship with their employees where they would take care of them. The employees were expected to work at that employer for their entire career. They were given benefits, things like pensions that signified they'd be there for a long time. And in return, employees were more loyal to their employer. They wouldn't just switch jobs at the drop of a hat, right? Well, it seems to me like we've moved away from that culture. Employee thinking and employer thinking have both changed. Why was that? Let's see. There are people that actually study this stuff, like professors of business and history and other things that, but that's not me. So let's see here. Post-World War II loyalty capitalism existed because the economic system rewarded stability. There you go. Modern capitalism rewards flexibility, speed, and financial optimization instead. No conspiracy, no sudden cruelty, just incentives. Why companies used to be loyal, okay, up to the 70s. Companies could confidently say, we'll be here in 30 years. Well, they still have that, they still do. They have that, like all the big industries are like that. Labor was scarce and specialized. I don't know how scarce it was, but anyway, pensions locked employees in by design. Yeah, that was intentional. Shareholder pressure was weaker. Yeah, that's another one. What started breaking it, like in the 80s, global competition exploded. Okay, so they opened up the different parts of the business world. Inflation and recessions crushed predictability. Yeah, that's for sure. Starting with there were 2 oil crises in the 70s in the US and globally that just shook everybody. It just turned everything on its head. Financial markets took over corporate decision-making. This is huge, yes. Yeah, in the 80s, that was like Reaganomics and Thatcherism and all that kind of stuff. The death of pensions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can go through it, but hopefully that makes sense. From what I know, that's all consistent. Anyway, there are 23 people here. Thank you for being with me today. If you want to learn business with me, check out my course, the $100 MBA. For what it's worth, I have an MBA and I've been a CEO. If you're interested in learning business, I've created this course. It's basically a mirror image of everything you would learn in a brick and mortar university program. For a master's of business administration, you learn absolutely everything that you would learn there, you learn in this course. The reason it works like that is because you get a reading list, you go through all the same textbooks they use in places like Harvard Business School, and I have a series of videos. I guide you through everything. I share insights from my career for what that's worth, and you can take advantage of the knowledge. You can go deep into areas that you're interested in. You can skim through areas you're not really that interested in if you like. You could skim the whole thing, or you could go really deep through the whole thing. It's up to you. It's completely flexible. You do it entirely on your own terms, on your own schedule, to the depth to which you're interested. And I created this primarily with entrepreneurs in mind, people that they want to do their own business thing, but they've never gone to business school. It's also partly for people that are interested in learning business. This is a really great, cheap way to put your toe in the water, see if it's for you, see if, it's like a preview of what you're going to do in a 2-year degree. And it's also a bit of a chip on my shoulder at universities who are charging 5 and 6 figures for this type of education, when like 90 to 95% of this material is in the public sector. Like it's out there. It's been around for a very long time. Like learning high school math, nobody owns that knowledge, It's out there in the public domain. So charging somebody 6 figures for them to teach you something that's in the public domain that you can learn yourself by reading a book you bought off Amazon for $5 seems wrong to me, and it's annoying, and I don't like how they try and gatekeep this knowledge. So I created this, for people that have a particular need, and if that's you, check it out. There's a link to the description. There's a link to the course in the description box below this live stream. I've also made a video describing the course that's also linked below. That explains how the course works, what you get, all that kind of stuff. So check it out. I've got a bunch of ads and stuff that I run about this. So it's been a very popular course so far, and I've sold like several hundred people have taken it. So check that out. If you want to learn business, but you don't have the time or money or inclination to go back to university, you just want the knowledge, this can be an option for some people that are looking for a very specific thing. So check that out. Oh, and if you're interested in that, I have another course that might be pertinent to people here. This is the course. It's called Write Like a Professional. This teaches you high-level communication skills. So everything that I learned going from a supervisor when I started to a CEO when I ended my corporate career, everything I learned about communication during that journey, I put into this course. So check it out if that's what you're interested in learning. Link in the description box below. And also I've made a video describing the course that walks you through how it works and what it covers and what you get. So it's as transparent as possible. Check that out. If anyone has any last minute questions about what we covered today, fiduciary duty, psychological contracts, things like this, incentive structures, let me know. Speak now or forever hold your peace. I will be back in about 45 minutes on this channel. I have a live stream where we talk about job search. So interviews, resumes, networking, all that kind of stuff. The biggest thing that the feedback I've gotten from people that watch my channel, I've asked in poll questions. I said, what are you wanting to learn the most? The answer that always comes back is networking, how to do networking. If that is what you're looking for, first of all, I put all of that into this course here. So check that out if that's what you're wanting to learn. Okay. Also, I have a free video that's linked in the description box below. It's called How Successful People Get Jobs. And I walk you through how to do something called direct outreach, a very specific type of direct outreach. that I've used myself to build my consulting business and things like this. So check that out if you're interested in learning that. There's a couple of resources for you. Jerry is here. Jerry says, I have a BA in marketing and like an MSc, so Master of Science in Strategic Marketing with global business. I was thinking of doing an MBA. Do you think it's a good decision? Well, I can't answer that for you because whether it's a good decision for you depends much more on you than on anything else. What your goals are, what you're looking to do with your life, what you're suited to, this kind of thing, what your financial situation is, et cetera, et cetera. Like those are very critical pieces of information. Obviously, an MBA is a good decision for some people, but for others, it may not be the thing that's going to get you where you want to go. So it depends what your goals are. I've done several videos actually on this channel. They're all in a playlist, I believe, called MBA, where I walk you through decisions like that. Like, should I take an MBA? What do I learn in an MBA? Is it for me? Will it accomplish the specific goal that I'm looking to do with my life? Is the MBA the thing that is going to get me there, or is it something else, right? So I've covered all that stuff at length in videos. If you go to my YouTube channel page, like my main page, The Company's Expert, there's a list of playlists, and one of them is called MBA, and that is some videos about that stuff. Obviously, my course, the $100 MBA, that's a solution that is tailored for certain people, right? If you have a couple $100,000 to play with, and you have a couple years to go back to school, and you have the opportunity to do it, and you want to do that, obviously this would not be for you. You would go and take the brick and mortar version and have it all accredited and get the certificate and all that. This is more for people that they want to spend like literally 1% of what you might be spending, and instead they want the knowledge. They might also want some practical, advice and things, which I've also put in that course, and this kind of thing. So it depends what you're looking for. It's also for students that want to dip their toe in the water and see if this is really what I want to do. This is a very low cost way to introduce you to the entire program. So if that's you, you might want to check it out. If not, that's fine. But learn as much as you can about it. I'm very much biased to saying it's good because it's helped me quite a bit. And knowing a lot of principles that they teach you in MBA can really help you. Like basically, the study of business is the study of how to make money. That's really essentially what it is. So that's good to know on several different levels. You know what I'm saying? It helps you advance in your career. Number one, it helps you understand maybe if you want to go into business for yourself and see opportunities and act on them and make money directly, it allows you to do that. It also helps you manage your money. So, you're not like a fool in their money or soon parted thing. You get money, you manage it properly, you grow it, and it doesn't just get eroded away. You know what I mean? So it's good to know about this stuff on multiple levels. So if that's kind of where you're coming from, then it may make sense, right? So the other part about the MBA is that when you talk about university programs, the thing that's always entwined in that discussion is the idea of networking. If you're going to go to a university, will that give you all kinds of networking opportunities? They might be there, but if you don't know how to take advantage of them, that's neither here nor there, right? That doesn't help you. On the other hand, you may not be interested in any of that, in which case you're just looking at the intrinsic value of learning that material, right? So there's all kinds of elements to this. You say business development. So what does that mean? You're looking to do business development? like, look, as I said, I'm biased to say yes across the board, but depending on your specific situation, it may be the right decision, or it may be more trouble than it's worth. It may not pass a cost benefit analysis depending on what you have in mind, right? If your option is you're considering going to, say, Harvard Business School and taking their MBA program, where you pay in the order of, like, is it $300,000 or something like that? It's like, you're going to really have to build a solid case to see if that's going to pay off. You know what I mean? But it really comes down to what's right for you. I know that's the most annoying answer in the world, but it's true, right? There isn't a blanket yes or no answer. It really varies for whatever person, what their goals are. Okay, but you need to figure all that out yourself. You need to get an understanding of what it is, what it can do for you, and what it can't do for you, and then you can make that decision yourself. Okay, we've been going for like an hour and 20 minutes. There's still 16 people here. Thank you for being here. You guys are awesome. I'm going to wind this down. Check out my courses. I will be back next week at the same time with another edition of Leadership and Management Skills. I will be back live on this channel in 40 minutes talking about job search. So either way, I'll see you guys soon. If I don't see you, have yourselves a great weekend. And always remember, you're awesome. Take care.